Welcome to the Common Good podcast on this beautiful Wednesday, December 22nd, and it's our Faith Wednesday. And in a lot of ways, it's the special Wednesday because we're closing out a season of time. You know, the holiday seasons, the Christmas season, the Advent season, the solstice season. These are all moments where you mark a transition from one time to the next. And that's what we're doing with this podcast. Our regular crew is here today. You've got Dominique Gilliard and Stephanie Rose Spalding and the Reverend Dr. Laura Subners Truax, and Dan Dietrich and Doug Padgett here. And we've been this crew that's been together since the spring as your Wednesday hosts and facilitators of this conversation. This little band of people are going to do different things in 2022, and this podcast on Wednesdays is going to have a bit of a different feel, different focus, different people, and so there's going to be some changes coming in this front. But this is our final time together, and we felt like it was a good one, and we kind of crammed it in, frankly, on the Wednesday before Christmas. You know, Christmas is coming in 3 days. Dominic, maybe you'll share that I think you were just traveling, maybe even out of the country maybe yesterday. So we really wanted to get this one in because Advent has a particular feel to it. Advent, whether it's in the religious sense or in the larger cultural sense, Advent is this phrase that means, you know, the dawning of something, the arrival of something, that something new is coming. We use it in lots of ways, right? You use Advent to say, like, you know, the advent of the printing press, the beginning of the printing press, or the advent of the internet, or the advent of a vaccine. We use it in all kinds of other ways. And in religious terms, it's sort of the narrative that tells you something is about to begin, something is about to happen. And, you know, not to delve into 1990s emo rock music, but you know, every beginning is some other beginning's end, right? So
Yeah.
so that just happens. That's just a real thing, and we are all about many things in this world, and this Wednesdays have been really great together. And so this seemed like a good time. We really wanted to talk together and talk with all of you. So if you're in the comments, we'd love to hear your Advent stories, where you find yourself. We're going to be making some shifts and changes in what are happening here, but we're going to stay engaged with all of you, because that's sort of the narrative of Advent, right? That whatever the new thing is, it's not the opposite of the old thing. It's the new version of the new thing.
Right.
So that's where we're going to find ourselves. We're going to talk a little bit about our relationship to Christmas, how we think about Christmas. For many of us, you know, we've been in professional religious work, which has a particular patina to it when you have to think about your religion and your occupation and your profession and your passions all
Yeah.
roiled up together. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Interested in your take on it as well. But hey, good to see all of you. And for our final time in this way, at least being together, it's a little bitter and sweet.
It sure is.
Laura, what's coming forward for you? What's your life going to look like going forward for
Yeah,
you?
big change, big change. I appreciated that intro, Doug. I think that's so right that every beginning has something else ending to it, right? And we can try to grasp too hard, I think, to what we have, right? And lose the opportunity for what comes next, or to really embrace it. For me personally, after 22 years of serving the congregation of LaSalle Street Church, I am stepping away as senior pastor, and it's been truly bittersweet. I was telling some folks that that church really made me into a pastor. I didn't start out as a pastor. I started out as a little nerdy and kind of wonky and fresh with a newly minted master's in a divinity degree that I got not because I thought I was going into the pastorate, but because I wanted to learn more about early church history and figure out what as a Protestant, I wanted to figure out what happens between the Apostolic Church and Wycliffe in the 14th century. That was like
Right.
lost century to me. So got a call from LaSalle Street Church. I felt like the luckiest person in the world when I came on staff,
Mm.
became senior pastor in '04, and have served that church ever since. And it's a curious thing to know when it is time to leave. But I am as sure about my leaving as I was about my arrival. And that feels really great. So, what's next for me? Um, I'm not really sure, too far downfield, but I know my very next step is I'm heading on a silent retreat, 30 days of complete silence at a Jesuit center in
Wow.
Gloucester, Massachusetts. And no internet, no phones, no talking of any kind except for a window every afternoon with your spiritual director, who I'll be assigned when I get there. And
My goodness.
it's kind of, after a person, as anybody in ministry knows, the challenge is to get us to shut up because words are the tools. But it's going to be talk about a beginning and an ending. I feel like I'm really, really going to be living that. Yeah. So I don't know. Ask me in February what's next.
Wow. 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 I mean, 30 days of intentional silence. And I know people who do all these things. They always tell you it's not about not talking. It's about doing something else that you can't do when you
Right.
are talking. So
Right.
it's not an absence experience.
Right.
But man, that just feels just outrageously difficult to
Crazy.
someone of my own. And Laura, actually thinking about you saying those words about like um the timing of everything, that is such an Advent sort of notion, right? That when is the
Hmm.
time? When is
Yeah.
the time right?
Hmm.
Um, and man, does anybody ever really feel like they have a handle on if the timing of what they're
Hmm.
up to in their life is spot on? Maybe in retrospect, we can look back and kind of, the accidental leadings of our lives can tell us that that all came together in
Yeah.
such a time as this. But boy, when you're in the middle of it, I don't know. And I've left my role, and we've all left different roles in our lives, and ever knowing if it's time to leave or time to arrive. I mean, this is why I think the Christmas story and the Advent story have this rich connection to the human
Yeah.
experience, because those things just seem so on point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that phrase, the fullness of time, that's used
Mm,
a lot throughout scripture, the
mm,
fullness of time. And it is a really interesting thing to ponder, the fullness of it. There's a physicality to it,
mm,
of when you're full and you cannot receive anything else because you're personally full. There's this kind of corporality to it that as a body,
mhm,
as a community,
mhm,
as a culture, as a society, there's a fullness. I mean, I feel like in many ways we're at a fullness point, a saturation point. I think in the coming years we're going to see a real shift in how churches are manifest in the world. I mean, whether churches in their current iteration stay the way they are, I think that's a really important
mm.
question and an opportunity, right? That we're seeing societal shifts in that, and so the fullness of time and what that brings forth. Yeah, that's really a good Advent thing to bear in mind. Mary pondered these things in her heart, we're told,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And
And and I think that there's a both and for my own faith journey. I think that there are moments when the urgency of now and the time is just
Mm,
like I feel the Holy Spirit saying like get up, move right this moment, and don't delay. Like there will be something lost or amiss if you don't move in this moment. And I've surely had those experiences, and even thinking of Advent and Mary, like immediately she got up and went to Elizabeth, right? And met Elizabeth at the right moment in her last trimester as Mary was entering into her first trimester. Like all
mm,
of those things aligned perfectly. Um, and then there are other times where it's just like, okay, yes, I'm not sure if this is
right.
exactly the transition, but something is saying, it's the season, right? And with seasons, unlike what we try to do
right.
in our human capacity, we try to mark like this is the moment that winter begins. But if I look at Chicago right now, and the fact that we have had no
Right.
no real markers of snow. Like for me personally,
Yeah.
that's something extremely sad because something has gone is not normal, I will say, in the seasons.
Mm,
And seasons are lengthier, right? They the transition of seasons don't happen in an exact moment, even though by our calendar or our marking of the moon, we try to say this is the moment that winter begins at 9:38 p.m.
Mhm,
You know.
mhm.
yep.
And so that feels unreal in a lot of ways. And so for me, this is it's one of those seasons of transition. It has been a season of transition all year. um and like so many other pastors that I know, this will be the end. Sunday after Christmas will be the end of my formal pastorate at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I have absolutely no clue what is next, but I feel in the spirit for me that there is a next. And again, I don't have a grasp on what that is, but it's also an increasing and a shifting and a shaping of my own faith, right? That to trust God that there is a next. And when I say that there is a next, I mean like job completely. I have consistently been connected to academia and university. I don't know if there's another job that is waiting for me in academia or university. I have been very much engaged in public life and public service around democracy reform. I don't know what that is looking like in 2022. I literally am like, I know that this part is ending, and whatever comes next, I am just trusting that God has a next.
Mm, mm-mm.
Wow.
So, so Stephanie, let me ask you because I that's so huge, right? These decisions are so big. So tell me how you sense that resolute voice, right? Of the spirit. That's what everybody wants to know, right? How do you know it's the right time?
Um, and for me, particularly in this situation, as it relates to pastoring of Ebenezer, it all of us globally have been dealing with this pandemic, and it has shifted the way that we minister, the things that we are capable of doing. When I came into Ebenezer again, there's a whole nother story around that, and I know we haven't heard from Dominique yet. Um, but having had that urgency at the beginning of the year because of what I was personally experiencing, and for those who don't know, there were calls of violence and attack after the January 6th, insurrection. Um, I began to experience some things very directly in Colorado Springs. And that was a moment where the spirit was like, no, get up now and leave.
Mhm,
Like, you
mhm.
do not have to be here. Get up and go. And so I did that and have not been in physically in Colorado since. And as the time went on, pastorally, there is something specific about being able to be in space with the people that need to be cared for. And as we continued on, um even though they were not yet ready for me to transition or to leave,
Mm,
the the level that I sensed in terms of harm that could be done to a congregation that does not have their pastor physically in space with them, like even in the same city, same state, um, is more problematic than trying to hold on to what is comfortable.
mm.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
good. Hey, Dominique, what about you? You've had a lot of transition going on. With the time we started this podcast, you've moved to another state. You've been
Mm.
traveling. You have a book. Your book that we talked about, about here is now an award-winning book. I think. Did I
Woohoo!
see the
Yes.
number one, like the book that the Inglewood book people tell you? This is if you're going to buy
Woohoo!
one book, buy the Bible. If you're going to buy two, buy Dominique. One of that little joke.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. It did win the Inglewood Review of Books Book of the Year award.
Congratulations.
So super excited
Yay.
about that and feels
Mm,
very validating because this was a labor of love. It was a pandemic book, and to write a book in the midst of the pandemic is a beast. And I
mm,
think I even struggled personally because of all the transition in life and because of how different everything is, where feeling like I wasn't doing enough to promote the book and to be out there and that kind of stuff. And so there was these
mm,
internal kind of feelings. And so it was just a huge validation to be
mm,
able to receive this award in the midst of some of my own insecurities and questions
mm,
and wonderings
mm,
around
mm,
everything that was going on. And for those of you who don't know, like, I love writing books, but the worst part about writing books is the self-promotion. It is so
yeah.
exhausting. Like if I ever stop writing, it is going to be in large part because of that.
Yeah.
And so I think in the midst of a lot of other transitions, since we're kind of going there a little bit more, I mean, I think for me, another big transition behind the scenes that wasn't as public is that I went into the emergency room in the end of February and was there
Mm,
because I got diagnosed with ketoacidosis and ultimately with diabetes, and I had no clue that I was a diabetic. And so
mm,
this whole year kind of has really been marked by a lot of change, physically moving, and this all happened like the week before I was supposed to move. So
mm,
like medically trying to figure out what does it mean to care for myself, what does it mean to prioritize my health and well-being in the midst of trying to live missionally for the purpose that I believe that has been placed upon my life. How do you figure out how to do the work well, but also set boundaries and say no so that you can actually
mm,
have your health to be able to do the work? Because if you drive yourself into the ground, you can't do the work either. Um,
mhm,
I think there's been a lot of kind of that discernment for me during this season, during this period. And so I'm not making the huge transitions that both Stephanie and Laura have. I think I am definitely transitioned in vocationally into like how I think about what I say yes to and what really is kind of the appropriate thing to invest myself and my time into and to give myself to um, in this season. The book has been really it's been a great kind of response to it, and I've been really excited about it. One of the new opportunities that I'm being invited into, I'm gonna get a chance to go speak internationally for the first time. So, the end of
mm.
January, I'm going out to Paris, and I'll be talking about the book at a couple
Yay.
different venues there, and so that'll be really cool and restorative and life giving. Um, so just really excited about some of that. The changes and the transitions are real. They're hard and informed part of why, at this point, kind of stepping back from this is the right thing for me. And some of
Mhm.
those kind of conversations. When we talk about Advent, though, I think the other thing for me that I just want to add into the conversation, I also think about Advent as a season of longing and like
Yeah.
what are we longing for,
Mhm.
what are we longing to see shift and change and transformed and transition.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of longings in the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of us who are waiting for things to be as they should be because they are not.
Right.
And so I think about that socially, I think about that politically, I think about that theologically within our religious lives together as we talk about the shifting and evolution of church. I think about this personally in people's health, people's marriages, people's families, all these things in which there is this real sense of longing in the world that honestly for me feels more palpable 2 years into this pandemic than any other time in my lifetime. And so I think as we talk about Advent, I wanted to at least name that as being one of the hallmark elements of Advent for me in my life. This realization that so much about what Advent really is to me is connected to this longing, this desire, this thing in our hearts that knows that things
Mm,
are not as they ought to be,
mm,
and this real desire for transformation and restoration in the midst of the
mhm,
brokenness that abounds.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a good perspective because it's easy to see why people might turn their religion or their perspective of their life into a future after life focused narrative,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
uh, disappointment of unmet longings can just become overwhelming, right? And
Mhm.
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
if you're forced into either, I don't know, if you feel that cynicism is on your doorstep, it might be better to reframe your attention to something else, right? And that's a thing that I think all of us as human beings have to deal with, and
Mhm.
especially as we reach ages where we have parents that are in one stage of life and we're in another stage, and other family members that are at other stages, and children and friends, and you just realize, boy, these all these longings and desires and real heart level care, most of the time goes unmet, right? And gets recast
Mhm.
in some other way. And that capacity to not just bail out and dream of another world, and to
Mm.
still hold those longings close.
Mm.
Man, that's the human struggle of Advent to
Mm.
me, is,
Yeah.
if there's light dawning. And just a little side note for a lot of people who don't know, the Christmas Mass, the Christ Mass for the church, was put at the time of the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere for a reason, because they wanted the
Mhm.
story of the light of Jesus being brought to the world to match what was happening in the world. So wanting to be able to tell a story of things moving from getting darker to getting lighter, and matching all of the other narratives around the world that had built huge festivals around that human experience, that maybe more light is coming.
Yeah.
That's just such a deep, deep yearning, that we want to be true. These longings, you should put it, Dominique.
Yeah.
It causes a dilemma for those of us, that are in the world of sharing the story of light and hope and love
Mhm.
and life. It
Mhm.
You start to
And
wonder if you're
having to
just
combat the
pandering.
ahistorical narratives that he wasn't born in December. He wasn't. So
It's not a
yeah,
birthday party. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
better
It
than that.
doesn't really matter when he was born. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So how are you all thinking? I mean, I know we've all tapped on this again, but can anyone describe their changing relationship to Christmas? Like, we're all realizing we have a changing relationship to some of the work that we've been doing here together, but even larger in our lives, changing
Mhm.
relationships is part of what it means to be a fully paying attention human being. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, Anyone thinking about? I've been spending a lot of time thinking about my changing relationship to Christmas recently. Does anybody have thoughts on your own changing um, connection point or perspective on it, or any of this?
I do, but I've only shared them with my therapist.
Really?
Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Let us in. Let us in.
Just between us, Stephanie. Don't go
Just
past
want to
this.
say thank you to Stephanie and her Stephanie Fox in the comments for the hugs and many prayers. Um, I have had a number of changing feelings, of course, because again, I have been, due to my personal faith journey and my family's faith journey, we've been practicing and celebrating Christmas as a family since the day I was born and before I was born. And so there are so many in-depth ties to faith and the sacredness of faith, but also the sacredness of family and community. And as I get older, of course my siblings get older and their lives have changed, and that coming together has been
Mm.
shifted. As you know, I have two brothers who are now married, and one who has his own children. I have a sister who has her own children and grandchildren at this point, and so like that and we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? So that mass family gathering has not necessarily been the practice of the last 2 years, and for um, those of us who are single and not have children or not even animals, I put on Facebook, I have no kids, no pets, no plants. It's different,
That's right.
it's very different when there is not that mass family gathering. And so I'm having to navigate that with my conversations with God, and even conversations with family, and now conversations with my therapist. So
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think theologically, I think for me, this season has become all the more important. While I resonate with everything Stephanie just said, except the fact that the singleness, because that's not my reality. But the shifting of family, like I've spent every Christmas of my life before the last two in Chicago, because
Mm.
that's where my grandma's house was, and we always have everybody comes back to grandma's house and we do Christmas together. And so this it's a shift, and honestly, quite honestly, I am somewhat concerned that we won't recalibrate and it be the same ever
Mm.
again
Mm.
after this. I think there will be
Mhm.
some, I think the majority will, but I think there will be certain things that shifted. Kind of same thing we've talked about with church. I know so many people
Mhm.
want church to go back to the way it was, but it's not going to happen. And so I think there is this way in which I am starting to try to embrace like these things that have been hallmark, definitive, communal spaces in my life aren't going to actually look the same as much as I might desire them to. And so there needs to be some acknowledgement of that, some lament of that, and
Yeah.
then some healing as we allow things to change and shift, because as much as we want to fight for things to stay the same, some things are beyond our control, and I think
Mm,
we have to acknowledge our limitations in that. But theologically, I think for me, people who know me, my heartstrings are really for those on the margins, the
mhm.
disenfranchised, the those with their backs against the wall. And I think for me, as I've really pressed into my faith journey and really tried to intentionally be proximate and in relationship with my sisters and brothers who fall into these various categories of the disinherited, uh, the theological conviction and revelation and truth of the incarnation and the fact that Christ is with us has become that much more important, because at the end of the day, like as I go through my own life struggles, as other people go through their life struggles, if you don't really believe that Christ is with us and that he Jesus is
Yeah.
Emmanuel and that we don't have to do this alone, like, I don't know what helps get you through. Because for
Mhm.
me, like,
Mhm.
that's the game changer. The fact that, like, Christ is with us, that Christ
Amen.
imparts his spirit to us to sustain us in the midst of all of the crucifying realities of life, all of the kind of horrid, kind of life taking forces that are at play within our midst. I think I've learned to appreciate Christmas and the incarnation and all of what it kind of is supposed to represent within our faith journey that much more. So
mm,
while yeah, I think my relationship with Christmas as a whole, particularly as I'm becoming more acutely aware of the impacts of the way capitalism is expressed in our country and all that kind of stuff, and how that really is so much more about what some people gather for than family and love and all these
mhm,
other things. That definitely tarnishes my my Christmas spirit and puts me in more of the Scrooge mentality. But I am very much appreciative theologically of what this actually time means and represents, and this has actually increased my desire to press into the Christmas season in a way that honestly I'd say since the pandemic it's just been intensifying and intensifying, and I think the
Right.
longer it goes it's going to continue to intensify.
mm,
Mhm. Man, Dominique, I think you just captured it so beautifully. And my experience and my heart right now really is very simpatico with what you said. although my relationship with coming together as a big family unit, that started to shift probably 8 or 9 years ago. We were talking in the pre-show thing that many of us had our Christmas Eves defined by the church, right? That whole holiday season was defined by all your church responsibilities. And for 22 years, I'll have preached a Christmas message on Christmas Eve. And for about 15 of those, my husband and I loaded our kids up into the car. And after that service was over at 10 p.m. in Chicago, we got in the minivan and we drove to Central Florida so that we could be there on Christmas Day with my family, because this is what my mother demanded of
Wow.
us.
Oh,
This is what she expected of us. And I have four siblings, all with families, all complicated, right? And for all those years we did this until one year, same thing, everybody loaded up, people bitching about it, like, when are we going to open our presents, all the good stuff. We got to Florida, made our way to my brother's house, which was probably 2 hours from the Orlando airport, the closest airport, and everybody had gone home.
Hmm.
We had gotten there too late for everybody
Hmm.
else's schedule. And it's a very painful memory. And it's
wow.
easy for me to feel like I'm the righteous one in this whole thing. But of course, they saw it differently. They saw it like, we've been waiting around for you all day. It's not our problem that that's your job. I mean, there's all these other, can't you privilege your family and all this other stuff. But that was the last time we did that. And it was the beginning of a different relationship with all those it's not artificial, because when we come together, it's not artificial. There's bonds of affection and respect and all that there, but to kind of try to make the day this be all and end all is ridiculous. And I feel like the covers kind of came off my eyes right then. And I realized if
Mm,
these relationships are important to me, then I have to act as if they're important the other 360 plus days, right? Not just on the one day. And the one day, maybe I just like cut that loose from the whole equation and,
mhm.
cook something I want to eat. We stay in pajamas all day. And on the other days, these people who I have claimed have a claim over me, um, and who I have responsibilities to, and that's so far beyond my nuclear family. That's my community. That's my neighbor of, down the block and across town and all the rest of it. To live more meaningfully into
Mm,
that reality, and to free it, to decouple it from Christmas. Yeah, it feels kind of great actually to know that Christmas Day, nobody has to come visit me. My children don't have to come home. They can go wherever they want to come, and to be and to do, and that's okay. It's
mm,
our love and affection for one another is secure, right?
mm. Yeah, that is so good. I've had this this old gospel hymn from the 1950s that the Staples singers sang called "This May Be the Last Time." I don't know if you know that song. This may be the last time. This may be the last time. I don't know. It was made popular, that phrase, because the Rolling Stones picked it up in their super famous song called "The Last Time." Uh, and I've been around. Or some of us have a mutual friend in Vince Anderson, and he sings this song a lot at his these revival events that he does in a bar in Brooklyn. And it has this sense to it, this gospel song sense that um, there's a thing we're experiencing right now that has some real value, and we really want to keep it. And this may be the last time that
Yes,
we're all here, that we're all in this, that we're all together. And
yes,
there's something about that, all of this Advent, all of this dawning, all of this waiting, this longing, uh, and then something changes. And in
hmm
society right now, there's all this talk about the great resignation. So many people that are leaving their
Mm-hmm.
jobs, He's actually created a real to do, if you go places and you're like, well, there's just places can't stay open. And you start to believe now the phone messages when you call a business and they say, due to extreme call volume,
Yeah,
that they have
right.
that as a standard. Like maybe you should hire more people if this is all, if it's so consistent, you can put it on your outgoing message. Maybe that's a
Yeah,
sign for
you
you to hire
good.
people. But people really have a hard time because work has, I don't know, something has changed in our culture. But
Yeah.
especially in the religious world, in the Christian religious world, the pastor resignation, the great leaving that's happening of
Yeah.
people leaving their pastoral
Yeah.
roles, it's a serious thing. And so I just think about all of the people and the communities where pastors are going to do what Stephanie, you and Laura are going to do, that in the next few days will be the final time in that role, maybe at that place. And maybe, no clear plans that you'll ever do that again. And what that means to all the communities, that this is the last time their person is going to be there. And of course, we've experienced an uptick in people paying attention to death in our society and the sadness that comes with that, and kind of the realization that all of that way things were is no longer the way things are. There's a way the Christmas story and some of my relationship to it has changed a bit, because there's a way that it's told as a very serene and happy, and like there's truth and goodness and light and love that's just below the surface, and we don't see it quite yet. For sure, that's the hope of the whole thing. In the dawning of the Emmanuel, as you put it, Dominique, was sort of an untold story for 30 plus years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of got to remember that part of the Christmas story too.
Right.
For a lot of people, the recognition about that day had a 3-decade long gestation period before they understood what that was about in that story. That we're also living in this story of all of this rending and all of this ending and all of this kind of sadness, and that prophecy that's heralded in the book of Matthew, that a change will come, but it's going to be a while. In fact, when the virgin bears a child, then we know the truth will be enlightening the world, is what the Isaiah prophecy says. So that the one who was a virgin is no more, that is now the bearer of a
Yeah.
child, and that's an
Yeah.
ending. This is the last time. Like somehow beginnings and last times they're all tied up together. And we
Yes.
have 2 little grandkids around our lives, so I'm like, I remember my parents being excited about Christmas when we had children. That changed their narrative of Christmas, and I was always like, good grief, like how what in the world? And then you're like, okay, I got you. I see. Yeah, like I will do anything for these little guys to. And you just sort of think, okay, I'm reaching a point where this might be the last time I'm getting, Karen. But
Yeah.
you're just starting, little ones. Like you're just getting going, and that those collide together in these family mashups,
Yeah.
of the
That's right.
of the
That's
I
right.
was a couple of friends that were talking about, they're I don't know, their kids are a little older, than should be still believing in Santa Claus, that whole thing. And they're like, I think we've reached the point we gotta break it to them. Like, I think they know, but they don't want to admit that they know. And like, I think we're lying to them at this point. Like, what do we do? And
Yeah.
that space between the first time and the last time, that is
Yeah.
just that's the pregnant moment. It seems to me that
Yeah.
is
That's right.
so rich with this Christmas stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so right.
All right, what about the war
You,
on Christmas? You guys think we got a war on Christmas?
oh,
Let's get right
please.
to it. Yeah. Just kidding. I am just kidding. We're not going to give that any fuel. I did see a
Yeah.
headline the other day that said, Christmas, America's new never-ending war. The war on Christmas is the one that we're just now people want to never ever give up. That somehow, yeah. And I don't know. Maybe there was a time when Christmas was a bigger deal than it is now, but it's hard for me to imagine. I don't know.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm very excited about, though, that's being birthed, and maybe you guys all know about this, is the Buy Nothing movement. Have you heard about this?
Mhm.
It started out in Seattle. And oh, is this a common thing? Okay, it started in Seattle as a little network of people, just neighbors who started to share their goods in common, and now it's grown to have millions of people in this movement. And you essentially join a pod, join a network, and whatever you have, whether it's a friend of mine was saying the other day, on her Facebook post that she logged in. Somebody needed a bunch of bananas for banana bread that they were making for some community that they were part of. And she said, I had entire things of bananas, bunches of bananas in my freezer that taunted me every time I opened the freezer door, because that's what you do. FYI, if any listeners wonder, what do you do with rotten bananas? You throw them in the freezer and then you take them out and you use them for banana bread and smoothies and everything else. So she responds to this need. Hey, I got bananas. I'm happy to get them out of my freezer. And 30 minutes later, the deal is done. Banana bread is made. No purchasing of outside ingredients required. And it goes on and on, from your kids' toys to your little used appliances. Just it's this remarkable new kind of Acts 3 sharing of things in common that I'm excited about it. I'm now part of a network here, and it's just easy and great. So a new beginning of sorts.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in one of those groups here in the city that I live in, and it got so big, I had to split into another one. So now I have to go. That group was archived on Facebook, which I don't really understand what that means. But then I have to go join another group, and
Do
I find
it.
myself, this classic 55-year-old man stuff, I guess. But like, oh my gosh, the level of work there is to have to go on and log on and respond to messages and set up a time for somebody.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah. So
it's
we've got to
funny
make
how
that work.
fast your tolerance, like, let's just go drop it off at Arc Value Village and just be done with all the stuff loaded in the back of the car and kind of give it all
Yeah.
away. But
Yeah.
it is that there is a need, and look, the Christmas season is the big buying season and all of that,
Yeah.
and it really does implicate this whole kit and caboodle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it interrogates it
Yeah,
for us, right?
absolutely. And we wonder, to what degree are we really structurally trying to dismantle this system called capitalism, and the way that we engage in these structures. And so even bringing it back to this Advent and this Christmas season, one thing that I am excited to be a part of is to stand in solidarity with the King family, as we call forth in the new year. Um, the time honored, quote unquote, celebration of the legacy of Dr. King. But we have a system, we have a structure where voting rights have not been protected, right? That
Yeah, that's good.
legislation across the country, 400 different pieces of legislation across the country to limit access to the ballot for millions of Americans have taken place in the last year, and Congress hasn't been able to move on anything. And so I am, again, excited to be in the space with communities and coalitions of people who are calling it out and calling folks in and interrogating, like, what is the spirit of what we're doing, right? That you want to honor the sacrifice that King has made in his life, but today you're literally working to dismantle and destroy everything that he thought was sacred, like from faith and in community, from faith and justice, from faith in equity, all the way down to just emptiness and a vacuum of words, right? Politicians that want to stand in congregations every 2 to 4 years and make empty promises for a democracy that isn't working.
Yeah,
Yep.
Stephanie, that's so insightful, because what you see in what's happened with King, and how since even 1984, which I think is about the time when the national holiday was fully recognized. I think that's right. And streets are named after King, and it's just he is much more universally accepted, almost nearly universally in the United States. But people who follow, like the teachings of King, say sometimes honoring the name is really used to then not have to follow the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that's true of King, there's a lot of people who are like,
Mm-hmm.
he's not the only one. Like, think about the
Right.
Christmas story for a minute. You can get together and do all your Jesus Christ Christmas, stuff. But if you don't
Mm,
follow that stuff, if that's not the path that you're on, sometimes it's more than just satisfying yourself by proclaiming your honoring of the name and recognizing the influence and the power and the glory of the work and the name. It really is designed to keep you from having to do the next thing, which is to live into it and to follow. And this is always the struggle with significant movement leaders. And I would say, that Jesus clearly is a humanity movement leader, right? And that's what Christmas
He might
sort of,
qualify.
yeah. If there was a category, he might.
Right. And not set a standard for some group of people.
He might not get Book of the Year, but he still makes other lists. Yeah, he could still. And that's really the thing. And this is what you just see happening with kings
yeah.
so much, right? I listen and watch people who are totally opposed to the agenda that King was about,
Mm-hmm.
claiming Martin Luther King narratives
Right.
as the reason why they don't want to teach critical race theory. Like, it's
Yeah.
just something else. So, I guess it sort of just reminds us this is how we tend to behave, right? It's not only a
Yeah.
religious problem, or only a political problem, or only a social problem, or only
It's a human problem.
yeah, we do
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
And then there's this kind of inevitability of it that I think we accept that we don't need to accept. So kind of going back to what you were talking about, Stephanie, I saw my son this week. They had last week they had Secret Santa thing to kind of close out the semester. So I have a younger son, younger than everybody else on the call. So he's still, doing some of this stuff in that age for the first time. And so I was out of the country doing a family wedding. So he was with his grandparents. And so I was like, "Hey, Ma, can you like pick up a $10 gift?" They're supposed to get a $10 gift. He's supposed to give it to another child. He's in third grade. So he goes to school with the gift, and it's time to exchange, and he tells his teacher, like, "No, this gift is for me. My grandma bought it for me." And it and it even matches like what I'm wearing. Like, I'm not supposed to give this to somebody else. Like, and so I don't know, like, if she actually sat down with him and was like, "Hey, I'm buying this gift and you're supposed to give it to somebody else." I did that before we left, but it was a little bit of time of distance, so he might have forgotten. So the teacher texted me while I'm out of the country. It was like, "Hey, so we tried to do the gift exchange and your son didn't want to give the gift. He said it's from his grandma and it's for him. So I don't want to make him mad. So I'm going to let him keep the gift." I said, "No, tell that boy to give the child the gift and exchange the gift, and we'll talk to him afterwards." But I think there's this way in which, like, it's all comedic and funny and everything, but I think there is this way in which we do, like, we kind of accept the inevitability, like, hey, capital, like, Christmas. And so I'm talking to my son. I
Yeah.
say, "Well, so what's your
Yeah.
favorite holiday?" He goes, "Christmas." And I said, "Why?" "Because I get gifts." And I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
like, that's not what this is about." And so, like, I think there are all these ways in which we really can, like, double down and enter in and redirect and, like,
Yes.
really start to get at the heart of some of this stuff a lot earlier than what we actually do. But we kind of dismiss it as like, "Oh, it's cute, it's adolescents, they're young, like, let them have their time." And by the time we actually really want to course correct, that stuff's so thoroughly ingrained, like, it's so much harder. And so I just want to encourage people, like, in this moment, I know we talk up here a lot of times. I want to just really bring it practical. Like,
Yeah.
when we see stuff, like, let's have the courage to do what we know we need to do.
Right.
Like, I
Yeah.
think we have all these ways in which we have these lofty aspirations and these ethical convictions, but a lot of times we actually work against the things that we say that we're striving towards in the way
Yep.
that we choose not to intervene and have the practical, even hard conversations, complicated conversations, before we might feel like our child is ready, or our grandchildren are ready to hear it, or before they want to hear it. I think if we really want to be the people that we claim we want to be, we have to be more intentional about intervening and actually course correcting when the opportunity presents itself, as opposed to kicking the bucket down the line. And I think we do that in the church, in our families, in our relationships. And I think we have to have a reckoning with that if we want to really
Yeah.
be what we
Good.
say we want to be.
So good. That's so right.
Well, and here it is. This might be the last time we do this. I think this is our
Yeah.
last time doing this, and that's a good thing to acknowledge too. And so I just want to give each of us a moment if we have anything final we want to say about how to keep up with us or what we want to encourage people about. This is going to, serve the function of Christmas, New Year, final time together, all those things. So
I just want to acknowledge our audience that has journeyed with us since the spring as well, and to say thank you to each and everyone who has tuned in or who has shared this later. Shelley, of course, has in the comments has said, I've learned much from each one of you here. Your insights, passions, vulnerabilities, and abiding love for all have helped to guide my heart mind over these past couple of years. And again, just want to say thank you to the community of the common good who continue to do this work. Again, this may not necessarily be the last time that you hear us. Period. It might be the last time the four of us are together, but we are still doing the work for the common good in ministry that has different shapes, forms, and manifestations.
Yeah. Amen. That's it. Yeah, and I just want to say thanks, not only to our listeners, but to all of you guys. I feel like there was an embodied, incarnational, that's what we call it, right? An incarnational. We lived outness of our convictions, and I felt it and saw it and heard it in the three of you, and I'm very grateful to have been among your company. I'm super grateful to have been a witness to Doug Pageant's epic ride across America. And also beyond that, Doug, I just want to name the entrepreneurial spirit you bring to everything you do. It's like you jump in with both feet. Let's figure it out while we're doing it. There's a very this embodied discipleship approach that is wonderful. You lead with action, and it's been great to see and great to be around. Thank you.
right on.
Yeah, and I think, I definitely want to double down on all that's been said, particularly what Stephanie said about our audience and folks who've been journeying with us. But also, I just want to say, we went from a group of four people who didn't know each other to folks who have really become, connected and be able to have some real honest, thought-provoking, challenging, spurring one another on kind of conversations. And so I just look at the beauty of how this community of the four of us has kind of emerged and evolved, and I'm really grateful for that as well.
Right on. Well, hey, thanks to all of you for all of this goodness. Our coming together was to say, can we do something together? And we did. And I think one of the great challenges ever is not just will you start something, but can you also have the courage to stop doing the thing that you started? It's actually one of the things that makes people not want to start something is they don't know what to do
Yep.
then. The real holdup. I don't lead in a church in the same way. And a friend asked the other day, said, "Do you ever think about starting another church?" And I said, "Oh no, I have no interest in starting one. Interested in making something with a bunch of people." And I don't know what I meant by the difference between starting something and making something, but for me, somewhere there's a difference. And what we made here is good and is right. But there will be podcasts on Wednesdays, and we'll be faith-focused podcasts on Wednesdays. The Reverend Dr. Stephanie Rose Spaulding and the Reverend Dr. Laura Sumner's Truax and best-selling author and award-winning activist Dominique Gillard will be part of that. We may or may not be all on the screen at the same time, but these things we're going to make other things in these very same spaces. If people are listeners to this podcast, they know that a couple weeks ago I watched the Beatles documentary and can't stop thinking about it nor talking about it. So we're sort of the Beatles at this point. It's 1969. We're going to all have musical careers that go on from here. Maybe we'll get together in some other places, and soon there will be a documentary.
Which
in
Beatle
50
are
years.
you, Doug?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh man, no! Don't compare. That's
I will
lame.
leave
Don't
that
do
to
it.
others. To is that?
Whoa!
I think that's
That
a
is my
sign.
doorbell.
It is exactly
Wow.
at 1 hour of, it's exactly 10 o'clock Central Time. And that's for whom does the bell tolleth? It tolleth for
Yes.
us. So,
There you
That's
go.
hey,
it.
love to all of you. Hope, light, goodness. And we're taking the rest of the week off the podcast. So nothing tomorrow or Friday. Just go watch reruns if you need a little dose of all this. And we'll be back and talk to you all next week. And Laura, Stephanie, Dominique, Dan, thanks for all of your participation in
Shout
all of
out
this.
to Dan.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
All right,
right.
Dan. Thank
So,
you.
All right.
happy holidays.
Bye, guys.
Bye.